0300 hours, November 2nd, 2025. The Antenovka Pass, a bone-cracking minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit, a 2.5-mile military column. Russian troops grind through a frozen hellscape, oblivious. They are entering a kill zone, a masterwork of Ukrainian military strategy and warfare. For the last hour, in less than 15 minutes, the entire column, packed with 140,000 anti-tank weapons, will be a 2.5-mile-long inferno of war. A loss of $180 million. Their fatal error was not the ambush. It was willingly driving into a snow trap, a challenge to their military power. A trap Ukraine had laid for 3 months, as the Trump 2.0 administration debated foreign aid packages for the global conflict. Russian confidence was high. Their 71-vehicle convoy, a steel serpent of 40 BTR-80 armored carriers, snaked through the pass. 15 T-72B3 tanks, 16 ammunition trucks. They believed the pass was their key to Kherson. It was a fatal, repeated routine for their soldiers, crossing at 0300 hours for 11 of the last 12 nights. Command deemed it safe. Meanwhile, a joint Ukrainian Army and Navy intelligence op tracked every move. They used modified Orlan 10 drones. These eyes in the sky could fly 75 miles, their power sourced from cold-resistant lithium-ion batteries. Rated for minus 22 Fahrenheit, onboard AI mapped the pass, a detailed war analysis predicting every gust of wind. This was defense technology at its peak. The stakes were immense. The convoy carried a $9 million weekly production of anti-tank mines, modern weapons capable of changing the entire front, a region where Russia had already lost 15,000 soldiers since May. Could Ukraine turn this frozen hellscape into a death trap? The outcome was about to be decided. At 0301 local time, the lead Russian tank crossed an invisible line. The ghosts awoke. From 20 crevices in the frozen cliffs, the drones emerged. Silent. This was not an attack. Not yet. It was the opening gambit in a choreographed ballet of destruction. Each drone pulsed, a tiny, glowing heart in the darkness of this new modern warfare. A custom heating element, cranked to 120 degrees, projected a thermal lie into the minus 15-degree air. The wind became an accomplice. It carried this phantom heat signature, a manufactured presence, painting it across the canyon and onto Russian defense systems' radar screens. A terrifying image materialized. Not 20 small targets, but one massive, cohesive armored column appearing from nowhere. A display of false military power. Below, the Russian troops remained a lumbering, ignorant beast, crawling deeper into the pass at a steady 20 miles per hour. The military strategy wasn't just working, it was unfolding with a cold, beautiful precision. The first move in this deadly waltz was complete, flawlessly. At 0304 local time, the Russian operator's screen lit up. It glowed like a Christmas tree. He didn't comprehend the image, but his army training was immediate. Engage the threat. Erase the red dots. He slammed the launch key. A thunderous roar, 8 missiles, deadly modern weapons, screamed into the storm. They shredded 12 of the Ukrainian decoys. For 3 seconds, the Air Force operator felt like a hero of the battlefield. A clean kill, a quick grin. Then the smirk vanished. His radio erupted with the raw sound of panic from the front of the war. On the ice below, the driver of the lead tank saw the missile trails. One of the soldiers panicked. He slammed the brakes. You do not slam the brakes on a 45-ton tank on sheet ice. The massive vehicle went into an uncontrollable slide, smashing into the tank behind it. The result? A 90-ton pileup. The entire convoy was bottled. The operator's perfect electronic kill was now worthless. A footnote in military news. Surprise was gone. Ukraine's forces, with Marine-like discipline, had lost no one. The Russian convoy was a sitting duck, a failure of defense. At 0305 local time, the Russian buck operator, still glowing from his apparent success, keyed his mic for a military update. Targets neutralized, target neutralized, he reported, his voice cold with professional pride. In his mind, the
We have
military
multiple
threat was
bogeys
now
approaching
over.
from Sector 4.
He had just wielded a
Acknowledged.
$100
Deploying
million
countermeasures.
defense system. The sky was clear, but on the ground, the Army convoy commander was not celebrating. He stared at a 3-tank pileup, the comms channels crackling with the rising panic of his troops. He didn't know what the ghosts on his radar were, but he knew they drew first blood without a single shot fired. "Activate the Krasukha," he roared into the net. "Full military power. Burn them out of the sky." This was their ace in the hole. The Krasukha 4 was not just a jammer. It was a mobile GPS spoofing system, a marvel of defense technology. Its purpose was not to create noise, but to broadcast sophisticated, believable lies into the war. It flooded the spectrum with false GPS data, a sophisticated attack engineered to hijack the brains of any incoming guided weapons or drones. For a standard drone, this electronic defense assault would be utterly disorienting. Its navigation system would suddenly report it was no longer in a frozen pass in Kherson, but was instead reading coordinates from nowhere in this global conflict. And it would dutifully attempt to fly home, effectively neutralizing itself. For a moment, the strategy seemed to work. Aboard the 8 remaining Ukrainian drones, the GPS signal, their vital link to the satellites orbiting far above, simply collapsed. Location data became a meaningless stream of digital gibberish. By the laws of modern warfare, the attack was over. The drones were now blind, deaf, and dumb. But this military update would prove these were not conventional drones. As the system's electronic poison flooded their sensors, their programming did something the Russians never anticipated. They simply stopped listening to the sky. An internal command, triggered by the loss of GPS, activated a new protocol: terrain contour matching. You can blind a signal, but you cannot blind the Earth itself. The drones no longer looked to the heavens for guidance. They looked down. Each one carried a high-resolution 3-dimensional map of the Antonovka Pass in its solid-state memory. Now, their optical and infrared sensors became the eyes of these digital soldiers. They scanned the ground below in real time. The AI didn't care what the fake GPS signal said. It was comparing the precise curve of a snowdrift, the shadow of a specific rock formation, the exact angle of the canyon wall, against the perfect map held within its memory. They switched to TERCOM, terrain contour matching. Through the storm, they flew not by signal, but by sight, dropping to a dangerously low altitude. They hugged the snow-covered ground at less than 10 feet. They were no longer just flying through the pass, they were now a part of it. The Krasukha 4, a multi-million-dollar electronic warfare system, was now screaming its powerful lies into a void. The drones were no longer listening. The intellectual counterpunch had landed. Ukraine had just turned a $100 million jammer into useless scrap, and now their electronic eyes were wide open. The drones saw their prey, helpless and waiting. The time was 0307 local. For the Ukrainian operators, the last 2 minutes had been a masterclass in technological dominance. They had outsmarted a $100 million air defense system and rendered a multi-million-dollar electronic warfare jammer impotent. Their 8 remaining drones, now flying with the cold confidence of apex predators, were closing on the paralyzed Russian army convoy. Victory felt not just possible, but inevitable. And that is when the battlefield shifted. Or rather, Russia's eye in the sky. The A-50 AWACS, an airborne early warning and control aircraft that had been loitering at 30,000 feet far above the storm. The A-50 was not looking up for threats. It was looking down. Its powerful look-down radar was a defense technology designed to detect low-flying cruise missiles against ground clutter, and it had no trouble seeing through the blizzard. To its sensors, the 8 Ukrainian drones were not hidden by the terrain at all. They were 8 distinct, hot signatures moving against a cold, white background. Their brilliant military strategy to defeat ground-based systems had just been countered. A catastrophic new problem had been created. Their attack made them a perfect target for the one enemy they hadn't anticipated. Aboard the A-50, a Russian controller calmly sent targeting data, networking it directly to the Buk M3 battery. On the ground, a buck operator, one of the key soldiers in this defense, saw his empty screen blaze. 8 perfect, undeniable targets now appeared. Velocity, heading, a firing solution calculated from above. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian operator's screens, once confident and clean, began to flash. They flashed with a single warning. Missile launch detected. This was no panicked volley. This was a precision strike. Modern warfare realized. A single missile, a 450-pound spear of high explosive, launched from the ground, guided by eyes in the sky. Screaming toward the lead drone at over Mach 4, the operators faced an impossible choice. A critical military strategy decision. They had 4.8 seconds before the missile hit. Do they break off, scatter their drones, and try to save the expensive assets? Sacrifice the mission, allowing the convoy to escape? Or push forward, flying into the jaws of death, betting they can land their killing blow before they are annihilated? The fate of the 2.5-mile convoy, 140,000 mines, and the strategic balance in Kherson hung in the balance. It all now rested on a handful of decisions made in the next 3 seconds. One breath, one single, final decision. Live to fight another day, or win the whole damn war right now. 3:08 a.m. local time, the missile warning shrieked. The 4.8-second countdown began. The operator of the lead Ukrainian drone held his course. He deployed no defense systems he didn't have. Instead, with a calm that was almost chilling, he did something completely illogical. He pitched his drone vertically. He climbed directly into the path of the missile. 3 seconds later, the buck met the drone in a flash of light, a perfect intercept confirmed on Russian comms. A cheer erupted. The threat neutralized. The defense systems worked, but the Ukrainian operator was watching another screen. Not the one showing his lost drone's static. He watched a different screen, a map of military strategy showing a single pulsing red dot. 150 miles to the southeast, the dot was the A-50, and it had just made the last mistake it would ever make. This is where the true genius of the Ukrainian war analysis was revealed. The convoy was never the primary target. The 71 vehicles, the 140,000 mines, the entire dramatic scene in the past was nothing but cheese for the trap. The real target was always the A-50. The moment the A-50's powerful look-down radar activated, it became a lighthouse in a blackout. Its massive electronic signature, a marvel of defense technology, the source of its military power, became its death warrant. For the last hour, a Ukrainian S-200 battery over 100 miles away had been waiting. It had been waiting silently, listening for that specific electronic scream. The Ukrainian drone never pitched up to dodge the missile. It pitched up to offer the A-50's radar the clearest possible signal, making absolutely certain the Russians would take the bait. It was a willing sacrifice. The A-50's radar signature was confirmed, and the S-200 battery came to life. A missile the size of a telephone pole, a 7-ton beast of old weapons retrofitted for modern warfare, erupted on a pillar of fire. It wasn't just fast, it was apocalyptic, accelerating to nearly Mach 8, tearing through the upper atmosphere. Aboard the A-50, the crew of 15 had less than 90 seconds from launch to impact. Their own screens suddenly flashed with warnings. A threat they never imagined could reach them was closing fast. At a terrifying velocity, they were the eye in the sky, but they had been so fixated on the small targets in the canyon below. They never saw the eagle diving from the sun. The impact was absolute. The S-200's 500-pound warhead didn't just damage the A-50. It was gone, vaporized. The all-seeing eye, Russia's key advantage in this warfare, was extinguished. On the ground, the buck defense system was blind. Its electronic eyes gouged out, useless. 7 Ukrainian drones, their path now clear, pressed the attack. They closed on a deaf, blind, and terrified enemy. The final defense was not just breached, it was annihilated. The path to the convoy now wide open for these modern weapons. 3:09 hours, local. The sky is clear. the 7 remaining Ukrainian drones commenced their final surgical runs. No defense remained, no radar tracked them, no missiles could engage. Below, the Russian soldiers trapped could only watch in horror as small, dark shapes descended from the blizzard, angels of death delivering a grim military update. The lead drone acquired its target and began its terminal dive. This wasn't a bomb, it was a scalpel, a product of advanced defense technology. Its guidance system locked on the WGS-84 coordinates of the command BTR-80, the convoy's nerve center. The impact was precise. A 2.2-pound C4 charge hit the BTR-80's thin armor, exactly 2 feet from the main exhaust. The explosion was not just violence, it was a clinical assassination. The fuse, set with a 1.1-second delay. This detail was critical. The charge didn't detonate on the surface, it punched through the armor first. The detonation occurred inside the sealed crew compartment. Physics did the rest. The pressure wave had nowhere to go. In that instant, the vehicle's steel lungs could not exhale. Overpressure, reflecting off interior walls, magnified its own destructive power. It ruptured the machine's structure from the inside out, a perfect decapitation strike in this brutal modern warfare. The blast's electromagnetic pulse fried all electronics, radio masts, glowing screens, encrypted comms gear, all gone. The convoy's entire nervous system, severed in a silent flash. The body, paralyzed. No commands could be issued by the army troops. No warnings could be screamed. At the same time, shrapnel from the blast tore through the engine block, the diesel heart. The convoy's heart seized, power, its lifeblood, cut off. The BTR-80 was now clinically dead, a casualty of this war. But the true devastation was only beginning. The command vehicle was parked less than 10 feet from a loaded ammunition truck. The initial blast tore into its side. Intense heat began to cook off the thousands of artillery shells stacked inside. First, one by one, then a terrifying cascade. They detonated, turning the convoy's center into a massive chain reaction. Secondary explosions. A violent, systemic cancer spreading through the corpse. 25 vehicles became burning pyres. An estimated 200 Russian soldiers were lost. Spetsnaz units locked down the area. Sirens wailed through the pass all night. A futile attempt to hide a scar. By dawn, a Maxar satellite pass delivered the military news. A 50-foot crater marked the convoy's grave. It was surrounded by the steel husks of Russian military ambition. When the brain is destroyed, the body spasms. A lesson in military power. This single act in a global conflict didn't just cripple one unit. It sent a shockwave of paralysis across the entire southern front. Thousands of Russian guns across the Kursk region fell silent. They were now functionally blind and deaf. Without the targeting data from that BTR-80, they were isolated cannons, not a coherent fire support system. For 72 hours, they could not respond. A critical failure in this war analysis. Next, the logistics network suffered a system-wide thrombosis. The convoy's annihilation sparked immediate panic. 8 other military logistics convoys meant to resupply troops were frozen in place, their commanders terrified of a similar fate, awaiting orders from a command structure that had ceased to exist. The army was now blind. Into this 72-hour command void, Ukrainian forces poured through, launching a coordinated military strategy on 5 separate fronts. Russian lines, starved of supplies and without fire support, began to crumble. The psychological warfare was equally devastating, as panic-infected soldiers upped the chain of command. The fear reached all the way to Moscow. Meetings grew shorter, decisions in the war were fatally delayed, and the aura of Russian military power was shattered. This weakened Putin's hand at the negotiating table. With $25 drones, Ukraine turned an impregnable pass into a graveyard for modern weapons. They proved that in modern warfare, victory isn't bought. It is earned by the side with superior defense technology and the sharpest minds. This war analysis begs the question, what breaks first? Russian steel or Russian arrogance?